Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from. My name's Georgia Marchant, and I am PR and social media lead at Fluke Reliability, which is the home of eMain and Proof Technic. We've got a truly special webinar for us today. Our speaker is Ray Latanzio. He's our senior implementation consultant at Fluke Reliability, and he's going to talk to us about ensuring a successful CMMS deployment. So first, we've just got a couple of people logging in, so I'm going to give them a minute or two to just get settled, and then I'll introduce Ray and we'll get underway.
Thank you, Georgia. Good morning, everyone.
Cool. Numbers are just ticking up. Awesome. I will start now and we'll just let everybody else kind of log on as they'd like to. So thank you so much again for joining us for today's webinar. The title of today's webinar is Ensuring a Successful CMMS Deployment, the Key Steps for Preparation. And as I mentioned, our speaker today is Ray. Before I introduce Ray, I will cover a couple of housekeeping topics. Today's webinar is being recorded. We will share a link with you after the event, and you'll be able to find it on the Fluke Reliability YouTube. So if you want to revisit the content or share it with someone, please feel free. As always, we do invite you to put your comments and questions in the Q&A chat box on your screen. So if you think of a question at all throughout the whole presentation, just pop it in there and we will ask it at the end of the presentation. Cool, so I will introduce Ray now. Ray is an experienced senior implementation consultant with over 8 years of expertise in deploying and implementing CMMS systems. He has delivered over 100 eMaint implementation projects and holds certifications as a project management professional and a reliability leader. Ray, thank you so much for being here today. With that, I will hand over to you for today's talk.
All right, perfect. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It's a pleasure to be with you today. And I thank you for joining the webinar on ensuring a successful CMMS deployment. We're going to be going over a few key slides here that I found over the years in my experience really help customers when it comes to preparation. Preparation is key for successful CMMS deployment. Preparation is key for really any software deployment or any project deployment, and a CMMS deployment is no different. So put together 5 or 6 key items here that you want to make sure that you take into consideration when preparing to deploy a CMMS project. If you've already deployed one, that is fine. These principles can also really apply to any project that you're undertaking at your organization. So definitely these are not completely specific to a CMMS project. You may also apply these to any other software deployment project that you may be working on. The first item that you really want to take into consideration when deploying a CMMS system would be how to manage stakeholder engagement. Stakeholder engagement is really critical because if nobody's really interested in your project, or if nobody's really paying attention to the project, if nobody really understands the value of the project and why it's being done, it makes the project much more difficult to be successful. Some key elements when it comes to stakeholder engagement that you want to take into consideration is simply first identifying the stakeholders. Who are going to be the end users of the CMMS system? Who are going to be the key players when it comes to actually rolling out and implementing this system? Are you going to have an internal project manager on your side, on the customer side, that's going to manage this project? Maybe not just at one site, but maybe multiple sites. Identifying the stakeholders is critically important because you want to make sure that these individuals, you understand what these individuals' role in the projects will be. Some of them might be decision makers, some of them might just be end users, but you'll want to identify those stakeholders early so that you know who this project is going to be adding value for at your organization, but also who this project will be affecting. Once your stakeholders are identified, the next thing you'll want to do is devise a communication plan for how to engage those stakeholders. So I'm sure, everyone knows a situation maybe at your organization where, you received an email months after a project was kicked off and you had no idea that this project was happening. You had no idea that maybe you were even working on something that could have added value to the project. That's why communication is important. It's really important to let people, the stakeholders, know that a project is commencing. It's also critically important to communicate to the stakeholders about the progress of the project as well. So are the milestones being hit? Are the KPIs that you've defined early on in your implementation being met? What does that progress look like? Devising a communication plan for the stakeholders can really be done two ways. Typically, one way would be push communication. That would be sending emails, sending reports out regularly to a group of stakeholders. Another method would be pull communication. So setting up, let's say, an intranet site on a SharePoint where stakeholders can go to that site, take a look at information regarding the project, take a look at the project status, and really become knowledgeable about the project and the current progress of the project. So once the stakeholders are identified, it's really critical that you come up with a communication plan for how to inform these stakeholders, keep them in the loop. Email can be one method, but I'm really a fan of creating reports and metrics and even, let's say, monthly debrief newsletters that can keep all stakeholders in the know about the current progress of the project. Another really important part of stakeholder engagement and getting stakeholders to be engaged and interested in your project early on would be a successful project kickoff. So a project kickoff is really, really important because it creates excitement for the project early on. If you don't do a project kickoff and make it known to the organization that this project is happening, you might run into a situation like I just mentioned where an end user that's planning on using the system might not actually even know that the project exists or that it's coming down the line. So a successful project kickoff is really great for getting the communication out, building excitement for the project, but also letting impacted stakeholders know that the project has been initiated and even the benefits of the project as well. The kickoff is also important for really kind of getting the key decision makers on the same page. The project kickoff meeting typically could last 3 days, 4 days, is really important for the key decision makers of the project to attend. That way everyone can kind of get on the same page about the plan forward and how a successful outcome is going to be achieved with the project. Another really important topic when it comes to stakeholder engagement is how to keep them engaged long term. A lot of times with implementations that I've seen in the past, let's say it's a multi-site implementation for a CMMS system where a client might be implementing a system at 15 or 20 different facilities, and there's a lot of momentum in the beginning. The first site, it goes very successfully. Everyone's super excited. The second site is the same. The third site is the same. The fourth site goes okay. There's a little bit of maybe resistance from the team there. And then as the project progresses, the actual engagement from the end users and the engagement from the project team can tend to decline. So it's really important not just to engage your stakeholders in the beginning of the project, but really important to keep people interested and keep people engaged throughout the lifetime of the project. So not just those first 5 sites that you plan on rolling out a CMMS at, also all 20 sites. And you want to create a plan for how to keep those individuals engaged long-term as well, not just in the very beginning of the project. So just some ideas here in regards to how to keep them engaged long-term would be quarterly business reviews, setting up a meeting, let's say quarterly, for the team to all get on a conference call together and review the status of the project. What are the current milestones and benefits that have been realized when it comes to the project, and what is the game plan for moving forward for the next quarter. QBRs, or quarterly business reviews, are a really good idea when it comes to engaging stakeholders long term. In addition to quarterly meetings, you can also do annual meetings. Those can be helpful for sure. Regular training. So a lot of times with these sites where they have 15 or let's say 20 sites that they're rolling out a CMMS at, some of these sites later down the line really need some assistance when it comes to training. So keeping the end users trained in how to use the software is critically important. You don't want to just allot all your resources at the beginning of the project. You want to make sure that as you roll out the system, you're engaging stakeholders along the way, and training can be a great part of that, making sure that all end users know how to use the system. Keeping stakeholders engaged long-term can also include new CMMS initiatives. So your year one with a CMMS system might look kind of basic. It might just be, getting work orders up and running, getting preventative maintenance up and running. And that's really kind of your goal for the first year. The second year might include certain things like getting into predictive maintenance or getting meter-based preventative maintenance up and running, and really kind of getting heavy into the reporting modules of the CMMS system, because now you have data that you can really analyze that's been inputted into the system for a year. So there's always something to work on in a CMMS system and any database in general, and there's always ways to make it better. And a lot of times that excitement that you can build around new initiatives can keep stakeholders engaged. There's always something new and exciting to work on in a CMMS system, especially one that's cloud-based like eMaint. So eMaint is constantly, we're always releasing new features for the system that benefit our customers. And those new features can come along with new initiatives. Maybe there's a new feature that you'd like to use. You can go into the system and make that a priority for year 2 or year 3, and use that as a way to engage your stakeholders long term. All right. So our second, actually I included a key slide, just wanted to include a graphic here. So when it comes to communicating and stakeholder engagement, I just want to make a point that it's not necessarily more. So a lot of customers think, oh, if I send emails out all the time, or if I hold meetings all the time, and I send reports every single week about the status of that project to the stakeholders, that's going to keep them engaged. That's not necessarily true. And in fact, I would almost make the argument that that actually desensitizes the stakeholders to the point where they might not even be interested in the project anymore. So when planning your stakeholder engagement, make sure you tailor the message to the specific stakeholder. If you have a maintenance technician that is working at a facility, I wouldn't necessarily be inundating their inbox with, let's say, reports and stuff like that. But I would let them know if there's an upcoming training opportunity for them to maybe learn a feature of the system that they weren't previously aware of. That is something that you could tailor to the specific stakeholder. So more is not necessarily better when it comes to just communicating endlessly. You want to probably scale back the amount of communication that comes out when it comes to stakeholder engagement, but also make sure that you're tailoring it to the right stakeholder. CEOs, CFOs are going to want to see different information than the maintenance technician. So make sure that when you are communicating, when it comes to stakeholder engagement, your communicating is tailored to the specific stakeholder. The next key to ensure a successful CMMS deployment would be executive sponsorship. Executive sponsorship is critically important for short-term and long-term success of the project. Short-term, you want to make sure that there's excitement that's built from the beginning, and that there's definitely momentum in the very beginning of the project that's coming down from leadership. Usually, in my experience, there is absolutely executive sponsorship for these projects in the very beginning. Long-term executive sponsorship can tend to be something that's a little bit more challenging. I think it's really important that for any organization that's planning on rolling out a CMMS system, that you make sure that the higher ups, the senior leadership team, are on board with backing this project today, but also 60 days from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, and 5 years from now. This shouldn't be, like a flavor of the month kind of initiative where, right now, a CMMS is important to the organization, but in a year from now, it might not be. Executive sponsorship is really important because it motivates the team, but it also makes sure that the success of the CMMS stays a priority. It also ensures necessary financial support for the project. So eMain is a subscription model. So every year you will renew your agreement with eMain. We'll want to make sure that the project has that sponsorship at the executive level because there could potentially be necessary financial support that's needed in the future. There could be training initiatives to support the CMMS that potentially cost some money. And it's really important, I think, to have that executive sponsorship so that the team, the project team, and the end users feel supported both from a motivation standpoint, but also from a financial standpoint. It also ensures that the project goals, the CMMS deployment project goals, are aligned with larger company program goals or program initiatives. So eMain and or your CMMS of choice will not necessarily be the only initiative that the company is working on. Every organization is constantly working on multiple initiatives at the same time. You'll want to make sure that the CMMS itself is aligned with other broader company initiatives that are taking place, and the best resource to do that would be the executive sponsor. All right, so the next key to a successful deployment would be the definition of success. So I misspelled success there, I apologize. The definition of success is critically important because it's really how you define your requirements for the project. So you might, have a CMMS system, an idea of how you want a CMMS system to work, but defining what success is going to be for you is critically important because, you're purchasing the system. Yes, it can close work orders. Yes, it can do preventative maintenance, but how do you define being successful? A year from now, looking back, what would you say made you successful? So that's one of the key items here for the definition of success is collecting the requirements. What are the requirements for making this project successful? So that's really kind of where you want to start. And this should be something that you include all decision-making level stakeholders in. You want to make sure that what one person wants from the CMMS system isn't completely different than what another individual at your organization wants from the CMMS system. Collecting requirements is critically important, and it's really important to all get on the same page in regards to how you need the system to work and also how you want the system to work. One handy way to do this to facilitate the requirements collection would be looking at the past from the future. So in the beginning of your project, sit together as a team and think about yourselves in the future. Think about your team a year from now and 2 years from now. And you're in a meeting 2 years from now, and you're reminiscing about how successful the project was. And you're talking to each other and you said, yes, it was amazing how we did this, and it was amazing how the system did that, and it was very user friendly. Doing this exercise, looking at the past from the future, pretending to be in a future place and looking back on what made the project successful is a really unique exercise and a really handy exercise that I oftentimes do with new customers that helps them visualize their own success in the future. You'll want to write those things down. So that's the next item here. You really shouldn't be just, talking about this stuff in a meeting out loud and brainstorming without actually writing them down. You want to actually get this stuff written down. Take a look at the list of success factors or requirements that you've listed out and compile a list. Take a look at that list together and refine that list. Another important thing is that you'll want to continuously reassess that list as well. Things change, business requirements change. What you needed from the CMMS system this year might not be exactly what you need from the CMMS system in year 2. Maybe there's a regulation that came down in year 2 that's going to completely change how you planned on using the system, you'll want to reassess those requirements. So I will just mention that defining what success means to you when it comes to your CMMS is something that can be evolving. It can be changing. You'll want to write down a list, but it could be a list that does in fact change and should continually be reassessed. The next item to ensure your success with a CMMS deployment would be project team availability. So it's critically important. I see this, I wish I didn't see it as much as I do, but oftentimes there's just not enough availability to make the project successful when it comes to ensuring key team members' involvement. So for instance, one of the big verticals for a CMMS system is manufacturing. I understand that, machines break and, key team members might be, the goal is to get those machines running and keep them up and running. And oftentimes you can be taken away from work that, is more desk oriented, such as, implementing a CMMS system. You'll want to make sure, though, for the success of the project that key team members are available, including subject matter experts. So if there are certain IT requirements that you're going to have for the project, maybe you're interested in getting single sign-on set up for the project, you'll want to make sure that on your end, you are prepared and have availability for key team members. eMaint and any CMMS system that you're deploying should, I understand that there's probably other projects that you're working on, but absolutely the CMMS should be a priority. If it's not looked at as a priority, unfortunately, those are the implementations that I've seen fail in the past. So you'll want to make sure that, even though, in business, we're always constantly juggling different priorities, you will want to make sure that your software deployment and your CMMS deployment is one of your top priorities. You would never want to make it a secondary priority, or you run the risk of the project failing. I did put a note here for including a plan for management of business continuity. So this aligns with the project team availability because it's something that I've seen more recently, definitely more often, where key team members, let's say, are leaving the organization, or you're getting new team members involved in the project. Just make sure that all the work for the project is not all on the shoulders of one person. You'll want to actually assemble a team of folks. Because if somebody leaves the team or if someone new comes on board, you don't want to lose that business continuity. You want to make sure that, if the champion was just one person, the project manager at your organization in charge of rolling out the CMMS was just one person, and they leave the organization, that can really spell trouble for the success of the implementation. And unfortunately, I have seen many projects fail because a key person left. So just make sure that we're talking about team members, plural, not just one team member when it comes to assigning responsibility for the project. The next key to ensuring a successful CMMS deployment would be the data itself. So data is critically important, and really, at the end of the day, all databases succeed or fail based on the data that we put in them. So data is critically important. It's never too early. You want to prepare and start to think about data from the very beginning of your implementation. So some key items here in regards to data would be to plan enough time up front for data collection. And you might say, Ray, I already have a CMMS system in place. I already have a trove of data that we're just going to put into this new system. And that might be true, but I always let customers know, if you're implementing a new CMMS system, view that new CMMS system as kind of like your brand new shiny car, where you really want, you paid a pretty penny for it. You don't necessarily want to just take data out of your old system and put it into a new system and call it a day. You may at this point want to take some time, take a look at the data, cleanse that data, and make sure that it's put into the system in a manner that's clean and concise. You might have equipment in there that's old, that hasn't been used in years. It's been decommissioned. It's a really good time to kind of cleanse your data before getting it into the system. But you want to make sure that you plan enough time for it. Data collection and cleansing is not necessarily something that happens overnight. It can be pretty time consuming depending on the amount of data that you have to review. So always plan for data cleansing. I have seen a lot of customers successful in actually hiring a project team member to work with them, let's say temporarily. They hire a temp position to just assist with the data component of the CMMS deployment. And also it's really kind of helpful as well just to have that person designated as the owner of the data collection and perhaps the data cleansing. You'll want to devise a data collection plan, just making sure, mostly to set a deadline for yourself. You don't want to just say, hey, we're just going to start collecting our data. You really want to create a plan. All right, this week we're going to attempt to get this type of asset on our manufacturing floor collected in the system or cleansed in the system. And then go from there. You really want to create deadlines for yourself so that you have something to work towards. When it comes to data collection and data cleansing, do not let perfection be the enemy of good. And what I mean by that is that you'll never have 100% perfect data. I'd be lying if, I said that even our own internal systems that we use at my company are completely clean. But don't let that be the enemy of you actually using the system. One example I could give you is that a customer that I worked with previously, they spent about 6 months, I think, collecting, and I think it was about 200 assets. And every single data point on that asset record was populated. They had every single serial number in there. They had every single model number there. They defined everything by asset type. So they did a really good job, but it took 6 months. And they actually held up the project for 6 months. So what I would recommend is that, there's going to be possibly some holes in your data at some places. Don't let that completely stop you from using the system. What I would say, if it is a field that you plan on reporting off of, though, if it is a data point that you do plan on reporting off of in the future, perhaps to use in one of your metrics or KPIs, definitely make sure to get that populated. But other information that's maybe just extra information that's helpful for the end user, try your best to fill it in. And over time, you can begin to fill it in. But I wouldn't let certain pieces of your data that perhaps are missing hold you back from actually using a CMMS system. You don't want to hold up an implementation for 6 months while you collect asset data. And this kind of dovetails into the next point here. Start where you are. Wherever you are in your maintenance journey, whether that maybe you're using paper, maybe you're using an Excel file to manage your maintenance. Start where you are. Start using a CMMS system and maybe start with the basics first. And as I mentioned, over time, you can create some goals for year 1, and then goals for year 2, and then goals for year 3 that really kind of advance the program, the CMMS system, to the next level. But start where you are. Maybe start with the basics. Don't try to necessarily start with stuff that's too advanced. Just really start where you are. Starting is better than not starting. The next item here, when it comes to ensuring a successful CMMS deployment, would be managing change, so change management. One important thing when it comes to a deployment is to expect change. You could do your best in that project kickoff. You could do your best in that sales process to really try to define the requirements for what you're going to be looking for in a CMMS system. But you're really just doing your best guess at that time. Things will change. Businesses are always changing. Businesses' environments are always changing. Who knew a pandemic was going to come and really kind of wreak havoc on a lot of the processes that we were used to. Expect change, but plan appropriate responses to those changes that you could foresee happening. So that's critically important as well. So for instance, if one of the key team members leaves the organization, have a plan in place for how you expect to maybe offset some of that workload if that change was to occur. So expect change, but also plan appropriate responses for those change. Also implement perhaps a formal change management process. And this is really helpful in multi-site rollout. So let's say you're rolling a CMMS system out at 5 or 10 or 20 sites. You'll want to have a formal process in place when one individual at an individual site, let's say an end user or the plant manager or maybe even a technician, wants to change something in the system. They want to do something different than what one of the other sites is doing. And that happens quite often where maybe they don't do things exactly the same. You have 20 different manufacturing facilities that 10 of them are doing things exactly the same. 5 of them are doing them slightly different, but kind of the same. And then the last 5, let's say, are doing things quite differently. You'll want to make sure that you have a change management process in place to handle requests that you get from the individual sites to enact change. From there, it should kind of go to a change control board that you define. Typically, it would be the project team where they would kind of field these requests from the individual sites and then maybe plan on implementing that change. There's nothing wrong with individual sites or individual users proposing a change to the system. And in fact, I think that's a good thing. Feedback should always be welcome, especially when it comes to the end user. The end users are the ones that are using the system day in and day out. And oftentimes the best ideas for enhancements to the system come from the end user. So you'll want a process for fielding those requests, those change requests, and then potentially approving them, but also potentially implementing them as well into the CMMS. So for instance, maybe one site wants to begin tracking downtime on one of on every work order. But downtime was not something that the previous sites wanted to track. That site could submit that as a request into your change management process. And then once that request is approved, maybe you make the decision, hey, do we just want to implement that at one individual site, that the site that requested it, or is that perhaps a good idea that we want to try to implement across the board? Change management is also super helpful for business continuity. Like I said, if there's certain turnover at the organization, you'll want to make sure that you can manage that change. And again, expect change. Change will happen for sure. And I put this nice graphic here from Spock and Captain Kirk. Change is the essential process of all existence. If change is inevitable, predictable, beneficial, I actually see change as beneficial as well. Doesn't logic demand that you be a part of it? So you'll want to make sure that, really change is a part of life. Just expect it, but have a plan for how to manage that change. All right. And that's really the end of the key items that I wanted to talk about when it comes to a successful CMMS deployment. But I do want to let you know one more thing. Keep calm and have fun. Life is short. So I have, in the many projects that I've worked on, seeing customers, it can be stressful at certain times. There is going to be highs, there is going to be lows. Expect them, but also just keep calm and have fun while you're doing it. Life is short, so you got to make the best of it. I really, have fun with it. There's going to be hurdles, but you'll overcome them. It's definitely, you'll learn lots with any CMMS deployment, and those things that you'll learn are super valuable for any other projects that you'll be working on, whether it's at your organization or really any aspect of your life. Always look at any projects like these as a learning opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ray. That was brilliant. As a reminder to everybody, today's webinar is recorded. So we will post it on the Fluke Reliability YouTube channel. We'll also send a link out to everyone who attended via email, just so you can access any of these kind of elements or share it with your teams as well. We do have a few questions that have submitted. The Q&A chat box is still open though, so please fire your questions in there because we've got a little bit of time, a little bit of raised time so he can answer some of your questions. A few people have asked if the deck will be available after the presentation. Yes, it absolutely will. We'll share that as part of the follow-up email. So Ray, the first question that I've got is, what is one of the most common missteps that you've seen customers make during the planning and preparation phase of implementing a new CMMS system? And how can this be avoided?
Yeah, and I touched on this, I think, a little bit in the presentation. One of the most common missteps that I see is a lack of preparation when it comes to defining requirements. So really defining what is it that we want this system to do for us? What do we need it to do to be a successful system for our use case? Requirements are important because it gets everyone on the same page and really kind of allows all the key decision makers and the stakeholders to have a shared vision for what they want the system to be. So if you don't have that up front, unfortunately, a lot of times you can create some tension, right? Because what one stakeholder might want to see in the project might not be exactly what another stakeholder wants in the project. How one stakeholder wants to use the system might not be exactly how another stakeholder wants to use the system. So making sure that everyone gets on the same page when it comes to the requirements, but also the vision for the system early on is critically important, because it's going to save you a lot of trouble later on if everyone agreed to that up front, right? Everyone was part of that process up front. Everyone knew what the goal was for the project and what the benefit of the project was and what the shared vision of the project was going to be. Making sure that happens early on is critically important to make the project successful, but also to avoid conflict in the future. I will say that as well. You want to really make sure that everyone is on the same page from the beginning.
Nice. We've had another one in the chat box that says, I'm trying to resurrect an implementation which has been moribund for several years. Do we have access to templates from implementations which have worked well for others? Or is it kind of a bespoke thing that's really kind of tailored to your company specifically?
To be honest, it is really tailored to the specific company. There are some broad general principles, of course, that, and we've outlined some of those in the presentation today that could be helpful to make your project a success. Even if, you're manufacturing, your system might be completely different than, let's say, another manufacturer based on, the industry. So in regards to actually, we do have some demo accounts, absolutely, that we could provide that really would allow you to see a fully configured system or a trial account that you could get and kind of get your hands dirty in a trial account and really kind of see how the system, a fully configured system works. And that can really kind of help get the wheels turning in regards to, all right, this is what it's supposed to look like. So definitely something that we could provide.
Awesome. That sounds good. Someone else has put, normally, who is the CMMS owner in an organization and who's accountable for it? So sort of what have you seen from your experience?
Yeah, it really depends. Oftentimes, it could be the maintenance manager, which I will say can make projects sometimes a little bit more challenging. A maintenance manager, their responsibility is really to manage the maintenance team and ensure that the equipment stays running. So the successful implementations that I've seen, you really should have a dedicated project manager. So that's working in conjunction with the maintenance manager. So the maintenance manager knows what the team needs, right? They know what they need from the CMMS system, but they might not necessarily have the complete bandwidth to devote to a project like this. So I would usually recommend an assigned project manager. So whether that's a consultant or somebody within the organization that's been assigned as a project manager, it's typically much more successful if it's not necessarily the maintenance manager. They work in conjunction with the maintenance manager. And then also, like I said, another resource who I mentioned earlier is assigned to helping with the data. So whether it be data collection or data cleansing, having that other resource that is really kind of dedicated to the data component of a CMMS is super helpful as well. There's lots of work that needs to take place, and you'll want to make sure that there's enough bandwidth for the project team members to actually make the project successful. I would say multi-site, excuse me, multi-site rollouts. If you're not just deploying the CMMS at one site, you're deploying at, let's say, 10 sites or 20 sites or 50 sites, you'll absolutely want to have a project manager. It's just not, you cannot, if there's not a project manager on the customer side, there's not going to be any consistency in how things are done. So, us as the vendor, we're going to do our best to make sure that we advise on how things are done. But a lot of times we need the support of, let's say, a project manager on the customer side to really drive that point home to the stakeholders, to the end users, to the plant managers at each of these sites about the vision and the value that they're going to get from a project like this. So absolutely, if it's multi-site, you should absolutely have a project manager. If you're deploying a CMMS system at just one site, I could see maybe, the maintenance manager and then possibly some other, maybe an IT person or possibly even someone that's part of the maintenance team helping. And then in addition to that, maybe like a temp or even like an intern that can help with the data collection component. What you don't want is the maintenance technicians sitting in front of a computer for 8 hours a day, working on setting up a CMMS system. That's definitely not a good idea. And the maintenance manager, you don't really want to completely eat up all the time in their day as well. E-main and CMMS system is just one part of your job. You don't want to make it 100% of your job.
Totally. And do you kind of see change management wrapped into that, or would you say that's a separate role?
The change management should be, it definitely, the project manager that I just mentioned should absolutely be part of the change management. So multi-site implementations are challenging because you have different personalities at different sites and different people at different sites that might want to see different things in their CMMS. So the shared vision that I mentioned in the beginning is kind of important for keeping those additional sites in line. They should be aware of the shared vision, but it's not going to completely stop, someone from an individual site saying, hey, I want this in my system, and I need it in there. But those types of requests should go to the project manager and the project team, the change control board, for either approval or rejection. If it's approved, absolutely you can implement it, but there really needs to be a change management process in place, or else what's going to happen is you're going to have 20 sites set up with the CMMS system that are just doing things completely different. And you don't want to do that because over time that can definitely present some issues.
Cool. We've got another question here that says, we're implementing a brand new CMMS system that will be replacing an aging on-premise solution that was in place in our organization for over 20 years. Although the system isn't meeting our business and strategy needs, the team has grown accustomed to using it. So there'll probably be sort of significant pushback, especially in getting the team members to use it. Do you have advice on how to gain their trust and buy-in? And I guess the change management piece kind of filters in really key here.
Absolutely. Yeah, and this is something that we see all the time. You're going to get pushback from people sometimes. Just expect it. Expect that kind of pushback, but also plan for it. When you expect things, you should have a plan in place to how to respond to certain things that you expect to occur. What I've seen to be actually successful is to engage those team members. So the ones that are pushing back, oftentimes they really just want to be heard. They just want to feel a sense of ownership and participation in the project. Obviously, they might not be at the level where they could potentially be a key decision maker in the project, but you may want to engage them further and really kind of have them give their own input into the project. I've seen that be successful. Once they give their own input in the project and they see that input has been, received and actually not completely disregarded, I think that's going to go a long way in making sure that there's less pushback on the project. Assign some responsibility to them. maybe get some help from them. They might begrudgingly do it at first, but I would bet money that over time, once they see, hey, I'm helping on this project, I want it to be, I have a skin in the game here as well. I want to see this project succeed. So I would actually, yeah, engage them more, and maybe even consider giving them a little bit of at least allowing some input into the project.
Awesome. Got another one here. So one of our core project team members recently left the organization, but it was right before we're about to start a 12-week CMMS implementation project. So we're debating whether we should place the project on hold or continue as planned with a less experienced colleague assisting it. What sort of considerations should they take into account if they're to continue the project, or alternatively if they put it on hold?
Yeah, and this is a really good question. This is something probably less so now. I see it, but during the Great Resignation, oh my gosh, left and right, these project champions and project managers were leaving, and this was something that was coming up quite often. So I would say, as long as you can make sure that the resources are still available to get the project completed, even if you need to bring in someone that is potentially a little bit less experienced, I would still say start. I don't think you necessarily want to hold up the project completely because you're down a person. I would say maybe consider promoting from within and giving someone the responsibility to kind of replace the person who left the organization. Now, the one situation where I would say maybe consider maybe holding off would be, for whatever reason, let's say the CMMS system and the deployment is no longer a priority. Let's say because of that change, it's not as much of a priority. You will never deploy a CMMS system unless it's one of your top company or organization priorities. If it's not, and you can have multiple top priorities, right? But the CMMS system and the deployment of the CMMS system should be one of the top priorities. If it's somewhere down the list, like 3 or 4, you're not ready to deploy the CMMS system. You want to make sure that it's a top priority for the organization.
Awesome. And then we've got another one here that says, can you expand on the future tense exercise that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a really interesting exercise that I've worked in some brainstorming sessions that I've worked with on new customers, where you, as a group, you're kind of reminiscing, but in reverse. So you think of yourselves, let's say 3 years out from where you are. So 3 years from today, let's say we're in 2026, and you're all in a meeting room, you're happy, you're talking about how successful the project was, what made it successful, what are the really successful elements of it that really added value to the businesses, and you're reminiscing at this table in the future 3 years from now. You want to write those things down that you're visualizing in your head, and even though you haven't achieved them yet, that's going to give you a blueprint for what the high level goals or high level requirements of what the project success means to you. So kind of visualize yourselves in the future. It could be a year from now if you want. It could be 2 or 3. But then, as you're almost as if you're reminiscing as a group, talking to each other about how successful your CMMS deployment was, and listing out reasons why it was made successful, and then getting those written down. And that can be a really good guide for defining your success, defining what success means to you, and actually helps with the development of CMMS requirements as well, the requirements that you need.
On mute there. I said, awesome. That's a really good tip. We have
And there's some
another
other
one.
really nifty exercises that I could, if you're interested, I could definitely shoot over some more. Another one is that can be handy is defining the product box. So if maybe the team is unsure about like the vision or the requirements of what the CMMS is supposed to do, pretend that you're designing the box of, let's say, a package that's going to be sitting on a retail shelf. And you as a group, and you can even do this in person, get a cardboard box and people and grab a marker and actually start writing your company's name, CMMS deployment as the product, and then some really amazing parts of that product, and start to jot those down on the outside of the box that would kind of convey the benefits or the value of that product. And those can really be good things for you to include as part of your requirements or your product or your vision for successful deployment. So actually like designing the product box that you would put on like a retail shelf to really convey what you're trying to achieve. And it's a fun exercise too.
Yeah, awesome. I like that. Kind of really visualizes it as well, because some people
Yeah,
are
helps
visual
you
learners,
visualize
aren't
it,
they?
but if you, yeah, visualize, but also there's a finite amount of space on a box.
Yeah.
So that's really important for making it short. You know, what you don't want sometimes with your requirements is, let's say, a list of like 200 items. You know, that might be true, but you also want to make sure that you define some key vision requirements and just general requirements, you know, separated from the large list. And defining the product box is a good way to really make it so that you only write the important stuff on there, because like I said, there is a finite amount of space on a box.
Awesome. There's another one here that says, do you have any thoughts on planning ahead for specific forms and data tables while collecting and cleansing data, or should that be defined in the system requirements planning?
Yeah, so we do have, again, a trial count that you could see. We have out of the box fields and forms within the system, and I'm speaking specifically to eMain here. We do have defined forms inside the system, and we do have a data template as well. So if you don't have that data template, it is an Excel template with different tabs on it that really is a good place for you to kind of populate your data in, just so that you know the correct format that it's going to need to be in order to get it into eMain. Another important thing to note, and speaking specifically to eMaint though, is how flexible our system is. If you want to collect a data point, you can collect the data point. Add it as take our template, but add a column for a data point that you want to collect. So for instance, maybe you want to, for whatever reason, track the color of the assets that you're importing into the system. You could very easily add a column for color. Is that a field that we have on our out of the box form in the system? No, but absolutely you can add a column for it in your data collection template or your data cleansing template. And then once you configure the form inside of eMaint, we'll just make sure that we add that field manually. eMaint is super flexible. We have the ability to create custom fields in the system to pretty much host data for any data point that you'd like to track in the system.
Awesome. We've also got one that says, you spoke about sponsorship. What happens if your project starts and stops in the middle? Has this happened? Has it kind of affected sponsorship, and how can you avoid it?
Yeah, definitely something that happens. And I think that, you know, you want to, it's no different than any sort of turnover that, you know, I think we experience at any level of the project. Like I said, maybe the project manager leaves, maybe, you know, a key project team member leaves. If an executive sponsor leaves the organization, you'll want to have somebody has to continue to give that sponsorship. The project will not necessarily be successful if it doesn't have that sponsorship. So it's critically important, I think, that if you lose that sponsorship at any point, you talk to another senior leader about who is going to really kind of own the sponsorship of this project, because you need that top down support for the project. Like I said, there might be financial things in the future that need to happen when it comes to making the project successful, and you'll want to make sure that you have the buy-in from the top down to ensure that, you know, that's not an issue in the future.
And ultimately it benefits the whole team, right? So they should be on board anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah, you want to, you know, it builds engagement for the end users. You know, if the leadership is behind the project, it also motivates the team members as well. You know, they really want to make sure that what they're working on aligns with the larger initiatives of the company. So having an executive sponsor backing the project can go a long way in making sure that, hey, I'm doing the right thing. This is aligning with what our senior leadership team wants, and it's, you know, part of a larger initiative, let's say, of where the company is going.
Fab, and I'll just do one last question. I'm hoping this makes sense to you because it doesn't to me. But it says, what was CCB?
Oh, CCB was Change Control Board. So Change Control Board is a way to field change requests. So you might, let's say it's a 20 site rollout, you could potentially have a plant manager at one of the sites who says, hey, I need this in my CMMS system. This is how I used to use it at my old company. I need this in there. I need this in there. I need this in there. You need a way to manage that change. So when the change request is received, it really should go to a change control board. And it's a fancy word for a group of people that says, yes, we'll implement the change, or no, we will not implement the change. But CCB stands for Change Control Board. You'll want to assemble a group of people that can make the decision of whether to say yes or no to change requests that arise from individual sites. It could also include the executive sponsor in that change control board. Not always though, but definitely like the project leader and maybe some other folks that were heavily involved in the project.
Fab. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ray, for sharing your insights and your expertise today. You got some really nice compliments in the chat box and in the comments section, and there was lots of questions, which is great. Do you have any sort of comments that you'd like to make in closing at all?
No, absolutely. Feel free to, it's been a pleasure today. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I think my email address was also on one of the slides. Feel free to reach out to me by email. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to, you know, offer any guidance that you might need. You know, there's going to be, you know, expect challenges with any sort of project like this, but have fun. You know, it's really, life's too short. So I really just want to reiterate that last thing. Keep calm and have fun. That's what, you know, life is about. And, you know, you'll learn a lot from these projects, and it's definitely an exciting thing. Just really, you know, stay focused on the success of the project, and you'll be good.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and thank you to everybody who joined us today. There will be a short survey that gets sent straight after this. It's just literally 6 questions, and it really helps us to kind of improve these webinars and get lots of nice people on board to speak like Ray. If you have any questions, you can also reach out to us at the Fleet Reliability team, or like Ray said, reach out to him directly. But thank you so much, guys. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you.